it's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Yes, it does, and good to have you with us on this Friday edition of the program. Sam Yarnell has the day off, not going to be hanging out with us today. That's okay, because Dennis Bernstein will. From thefourthperiod.com, SiriusXM NHL Radio, he does a terrific job on all things NHL related. Rangers a big win in Game 6 to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. They'll either meet up with the Bruins or the Panthers in those Eastern Conference Finals. How great would a Bruins-Ranger... You could have an Eastern Conference Final in the NBA of Celtics-Knicks and an Eastern Conference Final for the Stanley Cup playoffs of Rangers-Bruins. I mean, for the New York-Boston enthusiasts... Our friends watching in Connecticut on the Wax, one of our great affiliates out there in Connecticut. I mean, how great a time is this in your life? Just amazing. So we'll see what happens there. We'll talk with Dennis about all things Stanley Cup playoffs. Tino Pattigno will drop by the program. We'll talk with him. He does a terrific job on all things NASCAR, our NASCAR betting insider. Love talking with him. SiriusXM NHL radio contributor as well. Or SiriusXM NASCAR contributor as well. I got hockey on the brain. But we start things out in a place I didn't think we'd be starting them today. And one of the strangest stories that I've ever woken up to in the history of my 30-year career. August will be 30 years. Writing a book about it. In my 30 years in media, I don't think I've ever woken up to a story that made my jaw hit the floor more than the one about Scottie Scheffler that came out this morning. For those who didn't see it, Scheffler was arrested outside the PGA Championship at Valhalla. Now, here's essentially what happened. Jeff Darlington and some of the other ESPN crew that are working on the Players' Championship, or the PGA Championship. They were in a vehicle behind Scottie Scheffler as he was attempting to pull in early this morning in Louisville. Now, what happened was, tragically, somebody who was working at the tournament got killed. They were hit by a shuttle bus. So there was a traffic accident completely unrelated to Scheffler, and Scheffler was arriving shortly after that, where there were traffic cones set up and detours and rerouting, and they were only allowing certain people into the course. Obviously, one of those people they were letting into the course were the golfers to get ready for their opening round. Scheffler initially had a tee time, I think, of like 8:57, something around that, just before 9 a.m. Eastern. So he was obviously getting to the course to get his preparation underway. He thought, and this is according to his account, he thought that he was supposed to be rerouted and go one way. A police officer in Louisville decided, no, you're not supposed to be going that way, or thought you're not supposed to be going that way, was trying to stop Scheffler and his vehicle from going forward. And what wound up happening was Scheffler, even though this officer was tapping on his car and trying to stop him, kept going around these two vehicles that were in front of him. Again, he's saying he didn't know that this was the police that were trying to stop him. And if you look at all the, it's raining, it's wet, it's dark out, it's before sunrise, it is very easy to surmise that he was confused. The police officer may have been confused about who he was, because there are accounts saying afterwards the police were like, who did we just arrest? One of the officers went up to Jeff Darlington from ESPN, whose video you see on the screen right now, and essentially said, who did we just arrest? They didn't even know they were arresting Scottie Scheffler. He didn't pull the I'm Scottie Scheffler card, which a lot of people in that position might not hesitate to use. So he's in one of these courtesy cars. They're trying to pull him over. He, I don't want to say drags the officer, but the officer is attached to his vehicle as he drives further. I think it was like 30 feet or something like that. Then he stops. The officer grabs him inside the window, eventually gets the door open. They drag Scheffler out of the car. They throw him up against the car. They cuff him and stuff him. And they take him away. He goes to jail. He gets booked. There's a mugshot photo of Scottie Scheffler, who would be the last person you'd ever expect to see in a mugshot. I mean, this thing's going to be on T-shirts everywhere. Because this is, look, Scottie Scheffler is the embodiment of the, clean-cut, all-American. His wife just had their first kid. I always compare him to off-white wallpaper. In fact, off-white wallpaper might be more exciting than Scottie Scheffler. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. In a day and age where you've got the Aaron Rodgers of the world hanging out with Tucker Carlson talking, waxing poetic about Vladimir Putin. In a day and age where you've got, the Antonio Browns of the world and all these different professional athletes, former and current, that can't keep themselves out of trouble. Scottie Scheffler's the last guy that you'd ever expect to be getting hauled off to jail before the second round of the PGA Championship. But there he was, being taken to jail on these charges. And one of the charges is very serious. It's a felony. It's second-degree assault of a police officer. So Scottie Scheffler is looking at serious charges. Now, I think when all is said and done with this, cooler heads are going to prevail. The Louisville Police Department don't want that smoke. There's body cam footage that they're reviewing, and I'm sure we'll see it at some point. But what a wild way to start your day. And Scottie Scheffler got to the course. He's taking part in his round. We'll have a full recap of the PGA Championship on Monday on the show, and we'll see how these guys fare over the weekend. But how do you even go out there and play golf after something like this? By the way, just a note to the PGA of America, just a hunch, may not see Louisville back in the rotation, Valhalla back in the rotation for the PGA Championship for a while. Just a hunch. Just a hunch. We'll wait and see what happens with that. And we'll see what else Scheffler has to say over the weekend, what the police in Louisville have to say. I think these charges are ultimately going to be dropped. Maybe you give them a traffic ticket. But this thing's... they'll figure it out. We're coming back. NBA playoffs coverage is next.
Over 13 million Americans were affected by identity theft in 2022, and the threats go way beyond just credit card fraud. Today's identity thieves can use your information in ways that are easy to miss by just monitoring accounts and credit, like opening loans, transferring home titles, even committing crimes.
Someone got my social security number, made a driver's license, and it was used for criminal activity.
You can do so much with a social security number that I didn't know could happen. They drained my bank account. It was terrifying.
You're even more vulnerable than you realize. Your information is exposed through online shopping, banking, even corporate data breaches. No wonder there's a new victim of identity theft every 3 seconds. Only LifeLock alerts you to the widest volume of threats all in one place, like someone trying to use your social security number, open a new loan in your name, or even commit a crime in your name.
There was a big yes button and there was a big no button. I clicked, "That's not me," and LifeLock took it from there.
If you become a victim of identity theft, a dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will be assigned to your case and work to fix the issue on your behalf.
If something happens, you have somebody fighting for you.
All LifeLock members are backed by the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds, personal expenses, and coverage for lawyers and experts up to $1 million. It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity. With LifeLock, it's easy to help protect yourself.
I will be with LifeLock forever.
Join the millions of people already protected by LifeLock. And for a limited time, save 25% on your first year with promo code 25TV. All plans include a 60-day money-back guarantee. Call 800-710-7531 or visit lifelock.com/25TV to save 25% on your first year of identity theft protection. Enroll now.
Attention families with a loved one in a nursing home. If your loved one has suffered from bed sores, falls, broken bones, dehydration, or even death, you may be entitled to a substantial settlement. If you have a loved one who is injured in a nursing home, we will find out what happened. State violations are found against nursing homes every day. You have a limited time to file your claim, so don't wait. Call 800-398-5999 and speak with one of our attorneys. The call is confidential and free.
Sports Wrap continues on this Friday. Good to have you along for the ride. Dennis Bernstein of thefourthperiod.com, SiriusXM NHL Radio. We'll get some thoughts with him on a whole bunch of playoff stuff. Vancouver beating Edmonton last night, taking a 3-2 series lead there. Of course, the Rangers closing out the Carolina Hurricanes in dramatic fashion in Raleigh. So that was obviously a thrilling way for them to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Stanley Cup Playoffs Final Four. They are the first one to punch their ticket. And, I mean, you could have 3 other series that all wind up being 7-game series. It's pretty exciting times right now for the NHL, which is actually a good way to sort of dovetail into what I'm about to talk about regarding this NBA postseason for a second here. Look, you won't find a bigger NBA fan than me. I love the NBA. After baseball, it's my favorite sport. But we've got to acknowledge some ugly truths about this NBA postseason. While there have been some bangers of games, individual playoff games here and there, great performances, thrilling finishes, controversial finishes in some cases. Love those last 2-minute reports. While all of that has been great, there have been a ton of blowouts in this NBA postseason. And look, some of this is injury predicated. Sam and I talked about it on the show. I think it was yesterday. The fact that you've had so many injuries in this postseason. Players that matter. Kawhi Leonard, Donovan Mitchell, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, all of the Knicks. There have been plenty of guys that have been hurt in this playoffs, which has certainly compromised the integrity of these matchups. But with all of that having been said, I mean, you basically had last year's NBA champions and, arguably a favorite to win an NBA championship this year. In Game 6, a closeout game, mind you, in Minnesota against the T-Wolves, who they had beaten, 3 games in a row prior. Basically lose by 50 points. They were up 9-2, and then they were outscored by 50 points the rest of the game. That's embarrassing for Adam Silver in the NBA. Nobody's going to want to say it. You won't hear that on ESPN because ESPN wants to protect its relationship. It can't ever tell you that the NBA product right now kind of sucks in terms of the blowouts that we're seeing in this post. There have been so many blowouts. The only series that haven't had blowouts have been anything with the Knicks, which even had its share or one big blowout game, a couple of big blowout games in that series. But for the most part, the Knicks games have been competitive. And Cleveland-Orlando, which played a lot of tight games in that 7-game series, but nobody saw it because it was on NBA TV most of the time. And you won't hear that on ESPN because they're a partner. This is why we tell you to watch this show. I'm getting on a soapbox a little bit here. You got to understand that when you're ingesting sports talk, you have to make sure you understand who those sports talk partners, who those sports entities are partnered with, because it sometimes gives you a gauge or an understanding of why they're saying what they're saying, and more importantly, what they're not saying. They're not going to talk about the fact that this NBA postseason, for the most part, has been hot garbage. It's been garbage. Go look at that Clippers-Mavericks series that we were all excited about. Garbage! All that being said, after I step down off my soapbox, I am shocked that Denver, of all the teams in this postseason, laid that bad an egg in that spot and essentially now threw it to chance with this series going back to Denver for Game 7. I am shocked that they mailed it in Minneapolis on Thursday night. Because in a Game 7, it's really no longer in your hands. Yes, I know you can make the argument, well, the players decided on the court. Now, if you get a bad officiating crew, you get a bad call here and there, you challenge something early, it fails, you don't have a challenge late, bad call comes late in the game, you wind up not being able to challenge, it winds up costing you a trip to the Western Conference Finals. There are so many ways a Game 7 could go sideways. Nikola Jokic could twist an ankle. Then again, a lot of times you'd have to leave your feet to twist an ankle, and he doesn't leave his feet very often. But you get my point. Why leave it to chance? The Nuggets had their foots on the throat of the Minnesota Timberwolves. They had won 3 straight games. They weren't all that competitive. Only one game in this series really has been competitive, and that was the first game of the series as we approach this Game 7 coming up this weekend. But why leave it to that? For a team that knows what it takes to win a championship, for a team that understands the value of rest. And again, it plays into this idea that this team thinks they can just flip the switch. They can just flip the switch at any time. And look, they may very well do that in Game 7. This T-Wolves team, look, if the Nuggets wind up winning an NBA championship, we may look back and say the team that pushed them the hardest was Minnesota. I think the Mavericks might have something to say about that. I've picked them to come out of that series against the Thunder, so we'll have to wait and see. But why on earth, if you are Mike Malone's club, would you leave it to chance and let this thing get to a Game 7, even on your own floor, where Anthony Edwards could go off for 50, or Karl Anthony Towns makes everything, where Mike Conley turns back the clock like he did on Thursday night and makes a bunch of shots? Why would you leave it to that? Look, I'll close with this because we got to go. Championship windows are not this all gigantic thing. They're not bay windows. You know? They're more like car windows. And when that window's gone, it's gone. You got a chance for back-to-back titles if you're the Nuggets. Chance to be in the Final Four of the NBA's postseason. And you just gave away a closeout game. It's baffling to me. We're coming back. We keep things moving on this Friday edition of Sports Wrap. Tino Pattigno talking NASCAR All-Star Weekend for them. That's coming up. We'll recap the first half of the NASCAR season with Tino as only he can. Got to talk some hockey. My man Dennis Bernstein is here, thefourthperiod.com, SiriusXM NHL Radio as well. Some thoughts with him. I turned around. The Rangers, I think, were down, 3-1 in Game 6 against Carolina, and it was starting to look like, OMG, this thing's going to wind up going 7. And then what happened?
What happened? The best players played great. Chris Kreider got a hat trick, and there was a save like about 2:45 left in the third. Shesterkin made to keep the lead. That's what happened. Like, one team had a clutch gene all series, a double overtime winning Game 2. The big players showed up in a big spot. It's as simple as that. And the people that picked the Rangers thought that. You knew that Carolina was going to win the puck possession game for the entire series, but when push came to shove, they needed a big play. The Rangers found a way, and now they're in the Eastern Conference Final, and will, I assume, be the favorite either against Florida or Boston.
They'll be the favorite, but you don't think they're the favorite, do you?
I don't know. I'm starting to look. I picked Carolina to win it all, so what did I know, right? I think it'll be a close series, but right now I'm leaning towards the Rangers. Because here's the thing, Jay.
Wow.
If Florida doesn't find a way, and they got to go to 7, physically and emotionally, that's going to be tough for them. The Rangers are going to have a couple days off. They're not really banged up. They'll get their minds reset and they'll have time off. So the advantage has to lay with the Rangers at this point in time. Doesn't mean that the Florida or Boston can't beat them. But right now, I got to think if I had to do a power ranking of all the teams right now, the Rangers would be number 1.
What does that rest mean at this time of the year?
I think it means a lot. I really does. I really do, especially because you were on the brink, as you mentioned, of going to a Game 7 after up 3-0. You're saying, oh, your mindset's totally different now. We didn't blow that lead. Our big guy showed up in a big spot. Shesterkin made the saves we needed, Nate, and Kreider came through with a hat trick that now people are trying to compare to the Messier hat trick in '94. Slow down, okay? If they win it all, then maybe you go back and say that. But that was against an arch rival and an elimination game for the Rangers. They went out to win 7. But again, Jay, here's the thing. It's not about the depth players. When the Rangers have lost in the past in the playoffs, the big guys didn't produce. And now they're producing. And that's the difference in this team right now. They're very well coached. They have a great defensive structure. And they have the goalie. You have all the components of a winning team. And there's going to be only 4 teams left once we get to the next round. So, yeah, it's not inconceivable that you could have a parade in Manhattan in June at this point.
It's incredible. JT Miller scores with 33 seconds left. What a win on Thursday night. Look, give me some thoughts here on this Vancouver-Edmonton series following a thrilling finish to Game 5.
I'm one of the few. I'm not going to pat myself on the back because it's not over yet, but I'm one of the few that picked the Vancouver Canucks to win the series. Because I had a lot of friends at Edmonton. I spent the first round there with the Kings, and I heard, this is a different team. This is a different team. This is a different Oilers team. Well, guess what? The goalie isn't any good. Like, you're not great on defense. Your power play merchants, and your depth really doesn't score. So they finally got a goal from the bottom 6 last night in Yanmark. Nothing's changed, Jason, and now all the pressure's on them. I keep going back. Connor and Leon, well, Connor's played 9 years. It's never won a conference final game. Not even going to Stanley Cup and won it at all. Hasn't won it all. The same things happen over and over again to this team. They had to pull out the goalie in Game 2. They went with Calvin Pickard, who's a journeyman, and it hasn't worked. And that's the one thing when you're a top-heavy team, Jay. And here's the thing: we always talk about depth, and people kind of overlook it. Whatever, like top-heavy teams like the Leafs and the Oilers don't win championships. They put up points. They look really good when they're going good. But when push comes to shove, and you have to fight for every inch, and every player has to fight for every inch in the playoffs. You get a result down 3-2. They're not that deep. The goaltending isn't any good, and the defense is questionable. Could they get out of the West? Of course they could, because you're kind of lean on the team. But Jason, like, the better team is winning this. Like that last night, they dominated that game, Vancouver. And the Oilers, every time they lose this, they didn't get the bounces. Now you got outplayed last night. So now it's up to the Oilers to find a way in 6 and take it back to 7. But I'm not surprised, because I thought Vancouver had more than a puncher's chance in this round to win this round.
Give me a sense for, as superstars are treated in sports, the pressure for a Connor McDavid at this stage of his career. We talk about it in all sports with these superstar athletes, these larger than life figures in their markets, what it's like for him in Edmonton versus what we see with some superstars in the U.S.
I think there's less pressure on the player than the organization, because you know what the narrative will be. Let's say they go out in 6. Connor's going to leave at the end of his contract. Not that Connor's not great, Connor can't win it all, because Connor's 26 years old. He's got another 10, 12 years to win it all. Not unlike Crosby and Yzerman. A lot of guys won the cup later in their careers. I think there's a hell of a lot more pressure, Jason, on the Edmonton Oilers to find the combination of a roster that can help Connor McDavid win it all, or he might leave. So I think that's the more pressure. It doesn't minimize Connor's stature in this game. He is the best player in the game. I think the narrative would be, it's not Connor's fault. It's why can't a GM, whoever the GM is in Edmonton, find a team to surround him to win it all? I think that's the pressure more so on the team than the player.
By the way, Dennis, how wild would it be if we had a Rangers-Canucks Stanley Cup final?
Oh, yeah. What, 30-year anniversary?
30-year anniversary.
I wouldn't love those flights coast to coast, Jason. But other than that, it would be a lot of memories would be stirred up from the '94 final, which was a fabulous one. Absolutely.
Well, the Bruins or Panthers could have a lot to say about that. What kind of chance do you give the Bruins here to try and complete this rally down 3-2 still?
I'm sure Montgomery showed them the video of last year when they were up 3-1 and said it can be done. It can be done. Like you go in, and that's the problem with these teams, Jason. Like when you're in the second round, and granted, we're not deep in the playoffs, but when you're up 3-1 and you're the better team, close the games out. Didn't happen with Dallas and Colorado, and now they're a live underdog, the Avalanche. Same thing with the Bruins. Can the Bruins win a game 6, especially if Marchand plays? Yeah, the place is going to be a madhouse, TD Garden. I would pick the Bruins to take it to 7, and then you take your chances because they got up the deck, they got off the floor when everybody thought this was over in 5. They rallied, they found a way to win, and they play their game, Jason. So they're going to play the same game they played in the first 5 games. Maybe it's good enough to get there and beat the Panthers. But all the pressure's now on the Panthers, like because all the narrative went away about last year. Now it's the opposite narrative. That's why this game is so crazy. I love it. It's the script.
That's what I was going to ask you about. It just there is no script. There's just no script for this.
Yeah, there's no script. It's exactly the opposite of what happened last year. That same 2 teams in exact opposite positions. So, yeah, I love the Bruins side, actually. I think they can extend it. And plus, I want the drama of the Game 7. I was hoping there'd be 4 Game 7s if Carolina didn't get in the way of themselves in the third period last night. But, yeah, I think this could easily go 7. So I do like the Bruins in Game 6 on Friday.
Dennis Bernstein, thefourthperiod.com, SiriusXM, NHL Radio. Dennis, it's always fun. We've got a wild few weeks still ahead of us. Thank you, my friend.
Always appreciate the time, Jay. Thanks.
We're not going anywhere. We got a lot more to do on the show. NASCAR and Tino Pattigno. We'll do it next.
Attention families with a loved one in a nursing home. If your loved one has suffered from bed sores, falls, broken bones, dehydration, or even death, you may be entitled to a substantial settlement. If you have a loved one who is injured in a nursing home, we will find out what happened. State violations are found against nursing homes every day. You have a limited time to file your claim, so don't wait. Call 800-398-5999 and speak with one of our attorneys. The call is confidential and free.
All right, time to kick it into another gear, literally, on this Friday edition of the show. And if it is Friday, it can only mean one thing. It's a Tino Pattigno NASCAR Friday, ladies and gentlemen. He is here. He is him. All right, Tino, let's talk about last week first. Recap that. Goodyear 400. Brad Keselowski, your winner. Thoughts?
Well, I'm happy for Brad. I mean, huge victory for him. And I think this is similar, very similar to what we saw with Chase Elliott getting his win, right? This puts Brad back in victory lane for the first time in 110 races. But he was there. He's been there with speed. And I think that's something that was getting a little bit underrated was the fact that he's finished second a few times this season. He finished second at Texas, the race Chase Elliott won. Second at Talladega, a race he should have won. And I think Brad Keselowski and RFK, the team he owns and races for, have really been the top in terms of Ford speed. You know, we talked about when are the Fords going to prevail, and Brad's the one that puts them back in victory lane here for the first time this season. And I think that's huge for him. It's his first win back, in a few years here, and first win for Ford this season. So I think it shows that team has just figured it out ahead of the other 4 teams so far this season.
All right, we have video shown on the screen here of Chris Buescher and Tyler Reddick going nose to nose after the race. I went and watched it. I think it was Buescher confronting Reddick, basically saying, "Hey man, why'd you run into me?" Basically, run him off the track. And Reddick basically was like, "Hey man, I screwed up." Like he admitted it was his mistake. It was his bad. Buescher didn't seem to play it, but it was kind of interesting because in that confrontation, you get the sense of the pressures that come with the need to win a race, to qualify for the chase at the end of the season, to qualify for the playoffs at the end of the season, because he points to the sticker. He's like, "You've already got one of those on your car. You've already got one of those. So this impacts me far more." I thought that moment captured the pressures that these guys are under, especially as we enter the halfway point of the regular season.
It is so hard to win a NASCAR Cup Series race, especially when you are one of those 2 drivers, and Tyler Reddick and Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher has been around for a long time. He is now just starting to break out. Last year, he won 3 races. That was huge for him. He's now getting back up to running towards the front, a place where like for the first half of his career is a veteran now. He hasn't necessarily done that. So for him to understand that fact and now be racing, and oh, by the way, Chris Buescher's the same driver that lost in the closest finish of NASCAR history to Kyle Larson just 2 weeks ago. So you're talking about a driver who had not only what looked like to be the win at Kansas, but then a week later losing the race at Darlington. You got to feel for the guy, and the frustration was, I think, valid, but at the same time,
I think we lost Tino there for a second. See if we can get him back. We've been lucky enough to be rejoined by Tino Pattigno. We got the technical gremlins worked out. We called in the pit crew, and they came in and got it fixed. All right, recap. If I was going to ask you in 2.5 minutes to recap the first half of this NASCAR regular season, how would you do it?
I would start off by saying Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson is the battle to watch throughout this entire season moving forward. They have been the class of the field. That would be my first point. Second point would be the racing as a whole. We've talked about how this could be potentially the best season ever with photo finishes at Atlanta, Kansas, great racing at Bristol and Darlington in terms of tire wear and just overall on-track performance. That is something that is my second point in terms of so far the things that we've seen this season is just the racing action and how good that it has been. The third thing that I'm going to note is, can these drivers that are towards the back of the standings, like Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski got a win, he's now moving up. Can the Fords find speed in terms of how they haven't had it through the first half of the season? Who can get hot? That's who I'm looking forward to seeing in the summer stretch here, because last year we saw the Fords and Chris Buescher and RFK get hot for these summer months, and it seems like they've already started to do that now and figure things out right at the very last moment before we head into the All-Star break here and right in the first half of the season. So those 3 points are key for me, and I feel like they're just going to be if they can continue, it'll be a great rest of the way.
To go back to something you were saying before we got cut off about the pressures these guys are feeling right now, who's facing the most pressure?
I think Chris Buescher himself is feeling a lot of pressure, sticking with him because he just lost 2 races. Like, he literally, we talked about how hard it is to win them. To lose them in the ways that he just did is crucial, especially for a driver that knows that he needs to capitalize when given an opportunity, and that's why he was so heated. But I wouldn't really necessarily say it's pressure because the performances have been there. When we look at guys like Ryan Blaney, who's the past champion, Joey Logano, I think those guys should be feeling pressure because they haven't been performing well, especially to the extent that we know they can. Kyle Busch should be feeling pressure because, once again, RCR has just not shown anything this season. He started to get hot. I did pick him to win at Darlington because I thought I saw a trend with him being fast at Dover, being fast at Kansas, and then, boom, like a flip of the switch, bad again. So to me, I feel like those guys have a lot of pressure on them. Also, Bubba Wallace, he had a good, strong start to the season, but he has just been in bad luck, been in bad situations, got in a couple wrecks, and that put him in the first top tier of the standings, now down to the bottom. And that is not a place you want to stay towards the second half of the year. So I think it shows the different forms of pressure for each different type of driver and how their performances have varied. And I think that can go a long way as we move forward towards the second half of the year.
All right. Speaking of the second half of the year, it gets split up with the All-Star Race, North Wilkesboro, coming up this weekend. Tino Pattigno and I will continue the conversation on the other side. Handicapping an All-Star Race. Is it like other All-Star games where they're just all mailing it in? We'll talk about it as we continue on this Friday edition of Sports Wrap.
What's up, guys? What I'm about to show you is going to change the way you shave your head forever.
You can shave your head in 90 seconds or less.
With no cuts or nicks. It's 100% waterproof.
It even works in the shower.
Introducing Remington's Balder Boss. With increased flex and 5 dual-track floating head design, get over 60% more head coverage for a faster, closer shave and skin-close results.
No nicks, no scrapes. Fit in the palm of my hand, and the results were amazing.
Shave in the shower or with any foam or gel. With Japanese grade steel blades, plow through the thickest of hair. Anytime, anywhere. There's even a pop-up trimmer to complete your perfect groom. Now, you can try the Remington Balder Boss in your home for 30 days for just $14.99. Complete with a 5-year limited warranty and 100% satisfaction guarantee. You can also get our ear, nose, and brow trimmer free. Just pay separate processing and handling.
Give it a try. You won't be disappointed.
Order your Balder Boss now.
This Friday edition of Sports Wrap rolls on. Coming up in 10 minutes. Odds and ends. And it's just me today. Sam with a much-needed day off. But that's okay. My friends are here, including Tino Pattigno. Does a great job, SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, as a contributor there. Our NASCAR betting insider. All right, you got to explain this to me as the NASCAR novice that I am. I went and looked at the schedule for this week, and it says All-Star Race, All-Star Open. What the hell does that mean?
So the All-Star Race in itself is very special to NASCAR because it keeps changing from year to year, whether it be different tracks or different sort of formats that they are racing in. So just to lead you off there and sort of preview what the All-Star Race is going to be this year, it is at the same track with that last year in North Wilkesboro Speedway, one of the oldest NASCAR tracks on the schedule. So to have that come back actually as it came back last year was huge. The only difference is now repaved surface. So it went from being the oldest track, which it still technically is, but the newest surface. That's something to keep in mind. It's a unique track because it really cannot be compared, being a 0.625 mile short track. It's trademarked for the uphill backstretch and downhill front stretch. And like I mentioned, oldest surface to now the newest one. How can that benefit certain drivers?
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. But let me ask you something. Does newer surface mean faster surface?
That's the part that we're going to find out. Because it will mean less tire wear, because the older surface is that will wear on the tires more due to all the bumps and the cracks and the rough, just version of the racetrack that there is. With it being a new surface, it can also provide more grip, but at the same time, if it's a hot day out, it can be a slick racetrack if the grip is not being put onto the track from the rubber that comes off of the tires. So for instance, how we saw at Bristol so far this year earlier on, that was a concrete track, not freshly paved or anything, but the tires wore dramatically and the drivers were, feeling something like that. Now there's also a faster high banked oval, which we will not be seeing here in North Wilkesboro as it's a slower ladder track.
All right. So explain, you were explaining the difference between All-Star Open, All-Star, and the All-Star Race.
Yeah, so this is where things get tricky. So that's the All-Star Race and where it's going to be at and everything like that makes up the track. So the difference between the All-Star Race and the All-Star Open is the All-Star Open is for all of the drivers who are not locked into the All-Star Race yet. Now, the top two finish. Now, who's locked into the All-Star Race are past winners from the last 2 years, champions, and basically everyone you would kind of recognize on a NASCAR circuit. The big names, the winners, everyone who's won gets locked in. If you win, you're in. Now, All-Star Open is someone who hasn't won in the last 2 years, not a champion, any of those names. We have Ty Gibbs racing in this, Bubba Wallace, Josh Berry, Noah Gragson, a big name of Alex Bowman, who hasn't won in a little bit, and Chase Briscoe as well, amongst others. Around 20 drivers racing in this one to try to lock themselves in. The top two drivers advance. So if you win, you're in. You finish second, you're in. And then a third driver, that comes from the fan vote. So he could finish dead last, whoever it is, and whoever the fans voted on to make the All-Star Race will be locked in there as well.
All right. We got a few minutes here, Tino. How do you handicap a race like this, especially when you don't know what the results of this new repaved track are going to be?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. Now, another thing I want to note, too, with the Open, it is 100 laps with a 4-tire pit stop at lap 50. Now, okay, when I think about something like that in the Open, we'll start with the Open because, honestly, to me, I think there's a lot more value in betting on the Open, which is at 5:30 p.m. on Sunday, right before the actual All-Star Race at 8 p.m., based off of who's in the field. Ty Gibbs, Plus 200, yeah, he's the favorite. But what did Ty Gibbs do earlier on this season? Oh, he actually ran a tire test at North Wilkesboro. Now, this is a randomly selected thing, but it gives him an advantage. Like that, literally, it's like, playing on a new NFL field.
Oh, it's like going to do it's like playing practice rounds at Augusta National, before you go out there. Absolutely.
Exactly. So if anything, we know that Ty Gibbs will be a little bit more ready for this one. Joey Logano was also one of the other drivers that was involved in that test as well. And so to me, I like Ty Gibbs in this one, but if let's get down to managing, tires and everything like that. I'm also looking at Bubba Wallace at plus 350. He was plus 500 earlier this week. Just with the Toyota speed that these two drivers will bring, I think they're just going to fly past the field in this one, start up front, move up front. Bubba Wallace was in the actual All-Star race last season, and he finished in second. Yes, that was before the repave, but it's at the same racetrack. To me, I think a lot of people are undervaluing Bubba and his skill set coming into this one. If you're looking for a little bit more value, maybe Chase Briscoe at plus 750. But those Fords, we've mentioned it, have not shown us any speed. And if they did, those are the drivers that are locked in to the actual All-Star race.
But could this be, and we only got about a minute here, could this be the sort of the Ty Gibbs coming out party, like where he gets his first win? Wouldn't that be something?
I think it can. Especially at a non-points race.
Sure.
Right? So that's another thing. You win $1 million if you win the All-Star race, but it doesn't actually go and affect your season. No, I definitely think it could be. There's also a new tire option that these drivers can use and sort of strategize with. When we talk about strategy and betting on the actual All-Star race, I look at Denny Hamlin. He's been the most complete team so far this year with the best crew chief, the best pit crew, and hit plus 450. That's actually a fair value for Denny. And if you're looking at Kyle Larson, asking yourself, well, why is Larson plus 700 when he's normally 3 to 4?
FanDuel, he's at 900.
Here's why. He will not be racing in the heat races to determine qualifying because he's practicing for the Indy 500. So he's going to have a light on over there, basically roll out of bed, hop in a car, and yeah, still think he can win.
It's Tino Pattigno. Check him out on X at Tino Pattigno. You see that below. Tino, always appreciate it, my friend. We'll talk to you next week.
Good. Let's go All-Star Racing.
All right, just about time to close things out for this Friday edition of the show. Once again, a reminder, if you have not done so yet, go and check out the vodcast version of Sports Rep. It's available each and every day, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can get this show. Simple as that. Just go and subscribe, and if you miss a show, maybe your DVR is broken, can't catch us on TV, we're not in your market, whatever it may be. And if we're not in your market, we're going to get there soon. Don't worry. Just got some great affiliate news over the last few days. Can't wait to share it with all of you. All right, right now, time for some odds and ends. A bit of a different odds and ends to finish the show today. I would encourage all of you, if you haven't done so yet, if you get a chance, go and check out my column. I wrote it for MSNBC.com, NBCnews.com. Thank you to the folks over there for letting me write an op-ed on their platform. For years, I wrote stuff going back like 8 years ago. I was writing stuff for MSNBC.com and NBCnews.com, and for reasons I don't really know, I stopped writing for a while, and I decided to get back into it. My comeback piece is about the person you see on your screen, who, if I didn't tell you who he was, you'd probably have no idea who he was just by looking at him on the screen. His name is Harrison Butker. He is the field goal kicker who's had some huge kicks for the Kansas City Chiefs. He might want to take that foot that he uses to make those kicks in NFL games. He might want to put it in his mouth right now. Or maybe he doesn't. Because sometimes people have no shame. Have you no shame? For those who didn't see it in his speech at Benedictine College, I will save you the 20-some-odd minutes of having to watch it to find the clips that are pertinent to this conversation. But he got up on a stage at a Christian or Catholic university. And he is somebody that is a devout Catholic, and I have zero gripes with that at all. I grew up Catholic, got my public speaking start as a lector at a lectern, reading the readings and all these different things. That was actually how I got my start in public speaking. First time I ever got in front of a microphone as a preteen. And so I have no gripes with religion. There was a time in my life where I actually thought about entering the priesthood when I was going to Catholic high school. So I don't have any problems with religion. Consider myself an agnostic now. I know there's something after all of this is done, but I don't really know what it is. And I don't pretend to know. Harrison Butker got up on a stage and decided to wax poetic about his beliefs, and that stuff is fine. But when you start going into the territory of attacking the LGBTQ plus community, that obviously offends me for obvious reasons. All you got to do is do a Google search on me and you'll understand why. He also took a stance on women. Mind you, he's speaking to a group of college graduates, many of whom just spent $35,000 a year to go to Benedictine College. And he told the women in that audience, these young women that are getting ready to go on to the next stage of their life, enter the workforce, that the greatest thing they can do, stay home, pop out babies, love your man. It's a point of view that's so out of touch with reality. One, we live in a different world where women are very prevalent in the workplace. Some of them might be your bosses, coworkers, or those just trying to make a living. But to sit there and tell these women that have just spent $35,000 a year on college, $140,000 in total, that no, the best place you could be, the best place you can make a difference is at home. And by the way, I have no gripes with motherhood. My mother for much of my life was a stay-at-home mom. But that's not the world we live in now. This Stone Age view that Harrison Butker decided to give, well, it was offensive, I think, to many. I'm sure even to some of the women in that audience with a Catholic upbringing, who went to a Catholic college. I'm sure it was even offensive to some of them. But it calls to mind one other thing, and I want to finish with this. It calls to mind Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick merely took a knee during the national anthem. He didn't pull an Aaron Rodgers.
Robert Malone on there. You had
go on Tucker Carlson and talk about the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, the dictator in Russia and Vladimir Putin. He didn't go and talk about Vladimir Putin as being this, brilliant, studious man questioning whether Joe Biden understood the history of the U.S., but that Vladimir Putin does. No, we won't even go into the merits of that. Colin Kaepernick took a knee. And a little over 7 years ago, he played his last NFL game, despite the fact that he was still a very viable quarterback. Guy who went to a Super Bowl. Threw more than 2 touchdowns for every interception he threw. And you've got Harrison Butker and Aaron Rodgers using their freedom of speech, which we all are entitled to say things that are demonstrably worse than the stance Colin Kaepernick took. And Colin Kaepernick will never play in another NFL game again. These guys will be on your field in September. It's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks to Dennis Bernstein, Tino Pattigno. I'm Jason. We'll see you back here on Monday.